Good evening, guys, and welcome to today's episode of CrohnsCast. Tonight, we're sitting down with Tina, all the way from New York City, and she goes by the name of Own Your Crohn's. If you don't follow her already on Instagram, make sure you head across and give her a follow. She does so much for our community and is a real advocate, and I'm amazed and really happy to have her on the show tonight to talk about lots of different topics, actually, but there's going to be a slight focus on women's health tonight. So without further ado, let's welcome Tina into the room. Hey, Tina.
Hi there, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm very good. So for the people at home who may not be familiar with yourself and your social media accounts, do you want to just give them a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. So my name is Tina Swani Om Prakash. My blog and my social media advocacy platforms are called Own Your Crohn's. ownyourcrohns.com. And I've lived with Crohn's disease for nearly 15 years now, and with a permanent ostomy for the last 9 years. I've had several surgeries, over 20, all around perianal fistulizing Crohn's disease. So, you know, this has contributed a lot to my journey, took a good chunk of my 20s away. So, you know, I decided to go into advocacy work to really bring some of my experiences, yes, to the forefront, but really, you know, draw upon my experiences in the intersection of being a woman of color, of South Asian descent, but also having a taboo illness like inflammatory bowel disease on top of all those things. So talking about various different aspects of this condition, making sure different voices are heard in the minority health community. And thank you so much, Johnny, for having me on today. I really appreciate it, and I love the work that you're doing.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's great to have you here. So we're going to get just straight stuck into the details.
Sure.
One of the first questions I like to ask people is just like, how was it that you were diagnosed, and sort of what age were you? What was happening in your life at the time?
Sure. So I was initially diagnosed when I was 22. And I probably wouldn't have been diagnosed then. What had happened was I sort of proactively sought a diagnosis because my father had Crohn's disease that turned into colorectal cancer. And there were a number of people on his side of the family that had bowel issues, and his sister and his aunt all died of colorectal cancer from Crohn's disease. So it was one of those things where I was like, you know what, this is kind of the age to develop IBD. So why not, now that I'm working, why not, you know, get this checked out? I was asymptomatic at the time, although, you know, to be fair, growing up, I had all sorts of eye issues, joint issues, that, you know, the doctors would just sort of write off and be like, you know, oh, these are just growing pains, that type of thing. But come to think of it, when looking back, you know, there were clear signs that I was probably developing Crohn's from a young age. So I was actually diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2006, and I was 22 years old at the time. And I was working at Merrill Lynch, which is an investment bank, here in downtown New York City, when I was diagnosed, and it was kind of a whirlwind. I was rather asymptomatic, so I didn't really see any need to change my lifestyle other than take some of the medications. So it really didn't hit me until I had my first flare-up.
I mean, it sounds like you're very typical sort of blurry way into a diagnosis. So at 22, ulcerative colitis. Did that feel like a shock? Can you remember what that sort of felt like at the time?
You know, what's funny is it was so mild that the physician who found the colitis didn't even tell me. When I had my first flare-up in June of 2006, so just 5 months later, you know, I was really lightheaded, pale, like just felt frail, and I had been losing a lot of weight and not eating much. I landed myself in the hospital, and at that point, I had asked for my records, and I was like, wait, I was diagnosed with mild ulcerative colitis. He never really told me this. He just told me to take X, Y, and Z. And, you know, being, you know, the young kid that I was, I just listened to him and did it. And I didn't really think much of it. And I was just like, oh, you know, I did what I needed to do. I went for the test. It's okay. I didn't even understand what it meant to have a chronic illness. And then I think when it finally started to hit me was that month in June of 2006, because not only did I have my first flare up, that flare up made me realize, oh, Tina, you know, you are actually sick. There is something going on with you. You can't just have the kind of lifestyle that you've had, working so many hours a week, trying to study, trying to, you know, party with your friends in New York City. There's something's got to give here. And I think what had happened, it was a little bit of a turning point for me, because I had just sort of gotten into a relationship, and, you know, I really like that person and I'm married to him now. And I had told him, you know, I have this condition. It's mild right now, but I don't know what it's going to look like in a few years. And, you know, I need to know now, like, is this something you're going to be able to deal with? Because it's taken lives in my family. So I think that rude awakening sort of came 5 months into, I guess, being diagnosed without even really knowing it. And with that sort of rude awakening came, oh, Tina, you need to let the person you're dating know. You need to start making adjustments to your life. It was like a big wake-up call for me, I think, is how I would describe it, because I felt like for the 5 months prior, not only did I not receive a proper diagnosis, I was kind of in denial about it.
Yeah, it's really, like, denial is, I think, one of the first things that people tend to fall into. So what about it was making you want to deny it, and what sort of changes did you have to start implementing?
Sure. So I think being young and chronically ill, it almost sounds like an oxymoron, right? It doesn't sound like it goes together. I mean, yes, we hear all the time of young kids, unfortunately, having cancer, or nowadays pediatric Crohn's, things like that, all the time now. But like, when you've gone your entire life till the age of 22, not really being sick, and not knowing what it's like to be chronically ill, you think you're on top of the world. And, you know, here I was, I was really like, a pretty ambitious person, did really well in school, had a great career going for me. And all of a sudden I was just like, oh my God, I got to put the brakes on now. And I think that denial was initially like, I don't have to put the brakes on. I don't have to change my life. I don't feel like I need to change my diet. I'll just pop these pills and keep living my life the way I have been. I'll continue to sleep my 5 hours a night or whatever it is. And, you know, I'll get by and I'll work my 80-hour weeks if that's what I need to do, because that's what my job had required at the time. So I kind of felt like that was where my denial was. But I think when I finally got that wake-up call, so to speak, I was like, Tina, you have to start making changes. I made changes to my diet. I started, you know, talking to my family a little bit more about it. I, of course, told the guy I was dating about it. And I started to research it more, try to understand it more. Back then, there was no real, like we have today, all the social media, people talking about it openly. There was none of that. So it was a lot of fending for myself and finding my way around. And I think I sort of did that. And I continued to do that over the next year or two, until things got pretty serious health-wise for me.
Yeah, and fending for yourself, it's a really difficult thing, and unfortunately it's where a lot of us again start. We sort of go through that denial process and feel like we are on our own.
Yep.
What sort of things did you learn about yourself while sort of going through this cycle?
That's a great question, Johnny. I think initially I didn't know I had it in me to even like take care of myself. You know, like, you're an adult suddenly, like when you're 22 or 18 or whatever age, you know, you're a young adult. And, but you know, it's almost like you want to do all the things that adults do, but like the immaturity hasn't caught up to you. And I think, all of a sudden being hit with a chronic illness, and one as serious as inflammatory bowel disease, was like, oh, Tina, you got to grow up now. You got to take care of your health now. You know, like, yes, you can still have fun. You can still do things you want, but you're not, how do I say it? You're not, like, I felt like I was vulnerable, you know. When you're that age, you feel like you're invulnerable, that, you know, you can conquer the world. All of a sudden I was like, wait a second, I have something that's holding me back now, and I need to watch that something because it's a big thing. Does that make sense? And that's what I think fending for myself meant to me.
Yeah, it makes total sense. It is like we're living life sort of by a baptism of fire, so to speak. And I think it's one of those journeys with, I think, just adversity in general kind of forces you to make decisions, forces you to find out who you are and sort of what mettle you've actually got. And I think for a lot of people, it's very common. I've noticed that most people discover that they're stronger than they think, which is, I think, is an amazing sort of feedback for the community, especially people that are just joining the community that may be worried about being diagnosed, or maybe worried about symptoms that could potentially end up with a diagnosis that is a lifelong disease. So yeah, I think it's amazing, and I think your energy around IBD and your general energy and aura is so amazing. And it's like, I've followed your feed for a significant period of time, and it's always it just gets people energized. It gets people, it's like feeds that energy, feeds people to do more and to reach out more, and just to realize that they're not alone and that they can do it for themselves.
Exactly. And I think that's what, you know, the purpose behind my work is really to help empower people, because I know for a fact in 2006, when I felt like, you know, a bus ran over my life, I certainly didn't feel empowered. I was just like, oh my God, this is like the end. I'm supposed to just be starting life, and you know, here I am getting steamrolled by it. So, you know, that's the whole point, is to make sure the newly diagnosed know that there's life beyond this, that there is life in this even.
I think that's such a huge role for advocates, potentially those of us that aren't medically trained or aren't medical professionals, just essentially just getting out there and living our lives. And I really think that's it's become, I think, an even more important part of what an IBD or what a chronic disease community is there for. It's just to show people that there is a way. And I think that's one of the most amazing things that I've noticed from your page. So could you just explain a little bit more about Own Your Crohn's and the kind of things that you guys do?
Sure. So, you know, I'm of course a patient advocate, and I like to put out a lot of evidence-based information, information that I get from doctors or from different articles, studies, to make sure that patients are taking care of themselves, staying on top of the on top of their care. But I think, especially during this COVID-19 era, there's been a lot of heightened sort of panic, if you will, and rightfully so, because there's rapidly changing information for all of us. And I think being able to bring that information to our community in a way that's more digestible, in the sense, you know, pun intended, in the sense that, you know, it's in layman's terms, it's a patient sort of talking about it, is, you know, something that patients are more willing to hear. There's a lot of patients reaching out in different communities and different, like, online sort of closed support groups. You know, how do I, you know, do I stop my infusion? Do I do this? Do I do that? And I think they're scared. I think they're scared of what this virus is going to bring and whatnot. And I think being able to bring the information that I'm hearing from the doctors forward, you know, helps the community. But also, in addition to that, bringing forward some of the science, but on top of that, it's important to bring forward the psychosocial aspects and share my own story, my own experiences with various psychosocial aspects of this disease, or just various aspects of dealing with this disease, different surgeries, having an ostomy, having several fistulas. So it's really a variety of things that I try to bring to the forefront, whether it's things that aren't talked about much, whether it's dating and intimacy, or, childbirth, or women's health, or pelvic floor dysfunction. I try to talk about these things because I wish somebody talked about them when I was going through them and was trying to seek a diagnosis for them. So I try to make sure that things are as inclusive as possible, but also for the growing population around the world. I mean, you're out in the UK, I'm in the US. We both have melting pots in our country of multitudes of people being diagnosed with IBD. Imagine what the rest of the world looks like. At least there's awareness here in our countries in terms of what is IBD, what is an ostomy. In other countries in the developing world, where we're now seeing much larger numbers of IBD, there really isn't much awareness. There's so much stigma around it. You can't even talk about it. It's like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Type of thing. Like, you can't even, I was talking to someone this morning who was telling me, I don't really have friends anymore ever since I got diagnosed with UC. And it's just, and he's out, in Asia. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, is that relatability isn't there. So to be able to see somebody who looks like you, who talks like you, or talks in your language or whatever, and has the condition that you have, I can only imagine how much it can help people to see that. And I wish it was there when I was first diagnosed. And so whenever I'm putting out content, that's what I think of in my content, is how can I help people who really don't have the kind of education or awareness that I might have, and how can I bring that sort of support and relatability to them? So I think that's really the purpose of my platform, is to empower them, but also to bring education, awareness, good information, and let them know that they're not alone, that there's many people like them around the world.
Yeah, and again, I think that's one of the best things that we as a community of advocates can do, and I think you do it so well. I think the best thing I feel is that Own Your Crohn's offers like evidence-based work. It's not just stuff that you've made up on a whim. It's coming from medicine. It's coming from IBD qualified doctors. And I think that's a really important thing, because you can get a lot of well-intentioned stuff out there, but not necessarily coming from a good evidence-based place. So I think that's really important. One of the things you touched on there is the sort of the wider world, and that's actually how I ended up coming on to this series. Was like, I was actually messaged by a girl in the Caribbean,
yeah,
who was complaining about her local health care not having the ability to really inform her enough, or well enough, as she felt, about IBD. And yes, and she like asked specifically about women's health, and specifically about contraception, intimacy, and pregnancy, postpartum. And it's just like, I was like, wow, like your doctors don't seem to be able to give that information. It blows my mind. I'm like, we are very fortunate in the United Kingdom that we've got the NHS and are able to have a sort of a very high baseline of a standard of care. Absolutely. As just given. And then, you can obviously buy private healthcare on top of that. But the standard of care at the most basic level in the UK is exemplary as soon as you start comparing it to other parts of the world. And I think actually some people in the UK could probably do with drawing that comparison sometimes, the amount of people that complain about their free healthcare. But yeah, it's such an important topic. And I think, yeah, it blows my mind. And that's the other thing as well. What I've noticed through this podcast is something you touched on as well, is just how different societies seem to have a taboo or a more taboo approach to IBD, or in illnesses that are chronic, and in particular that involve your digestive tract and your sort of your nether regions, should we say?
All right, nether regions. Yeah.
But it seems to be predominantly sort of like, I don't want to, like Asian societies or island societies, or people of that ancestry, where they're sort of like in an Indian or Pakistani sort of family. In the UK, I spoke to someone who's from that background and said it was in their experience was very different, because their sort of family was still in the way sort of arranging marriages, where they would discuss about their son's suitability to your daughter, and the fact that person's got a chronic disease. Well, that's not compatible.
Exactly. Marriageability is a big problem when you have a condition like this. Look, I know people, Johnny, who have epilepsy or who have arthritis, who, you know, have told me they'll probably never get married, or friends of friends and my friends have told me they'll probably never be able to get married because of the arranged marriage predominant sort of system. And you think living in America or living in the UK, it would be different. It's not. We're carrying over these values from hundreds, if not thousands of years. And, you know, people say, well, that sounds ableist. And I will say, yes, it is. But we have to understand that the paradigm that this is coming from is sort of, you know, arranged marriage is based on fitness. It's based on, you know, qualifications. It's based on putting a resume forward. We call it a biodata forward, and saying, you know what, this person is bringing X, Y, Z to the table. And, you know, the other person is bringing X, Y, Z to the table. So this is a suitable match. So it's based on that premise. Now in 2020, though, it's got this definitely ableist sort of overtones, not even undertones, because it feels very unfair. And I have to say that I have felt that it's very unfair at many times, because I didn't have an arranged marriage. You know, I fell in love, you know, and he's been by my side through it all. But there's still that expectation, whether it's from his family or society at large, oh, but she has to be fit to be married to you. You know, so even though that we didn't have an arranged marriage, it's still got, you know, the sort of shadows of arranged marriage attached to it, even though we didn't have an arranged marriage. So it's still about fitness, the ability to do things around the house, whether that's cook and clean, whether it's go out and work, whether it's go to school. And chronic illness inherently means you might not be able to be as productive as the person next to you who might be able-bodied. So this is kind of a very hard thing to wrap your head around, being South Asian and having a major chronic illness that's been debilitating through and through. And for me, in my 20s, when, you know, I was supposedly at the top of my game, here I am going from, oh, she'd be a trophy to marry. Oh, no. You don't marry her. She's really sick. So it just feels so unfair in this generation, in this era. But going back literally thousands of years, this is how it's been done. And you're right. It's an Asian predominant thing. I've heard it coming out of Latin America. I've heard it coming out of Africa, but it's definitely a South Asian, Central Asian, and Far East Asian thing as well, Southeast Asian thing, like very much an Asian thing, where, you know, you respect your elders, you listen to your elders with regards to who you're going to marry. And there's a lot that goes into fitness to be married, whether or not you have an arranged marriage. So that's still very much the paradigm, even though we are not in those actual countries. We're in America, or we're in the UK, or in the Western world in general. These things are still applying. And that makes it really, really hard for us to sort of come to terms with the fact that, oh my God, we have this illness, we're really young, and apparently we're undeserving of love now too. So, you know, you see what I'm saying? It's got like so many different moving parts to it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of moving parts to that. And it's Yeah, it's just interesting that you feel that it's sort of very focused on a sort of the Asian heritage. What's also really interesting, and I don't know if I'm right in thinking, is it's almost like the immigrant mentality within America, where first, second, third generations hold on to the sort of old country ways as and almost put it on a pedestal. And I like, certain elements of that are worth retaining, and there's elements of, like you mentioned there, listening to your elders or at least respecting your elders. And there's elements of like social constructs that we have that maybe aren't as present in a sort of Western society and things like that. But yeah, I think it's crazy that in this day and age that there is still such a focus. But then also in the same vein, I think you mentioned earlier talking, and I'm being honest about your disease with your is it your husband now?
Yeah, my husband Anand. ANA.
And I think that's a really important aspect when you're carrying a chronic disease such as IBD, is having that honesty when you're like not necessarily maybe right at the start, but certainly in a very short time, because it does impact us, and it can, depending if you're how lucky you are, I guess, or what type of diagnosis you've got, it can be sometimes very limiting. And for somebody who's maybe not experienced a chronic disease via either having or living or knowing somebody, it can be certainly a roller coaster ride at best.
Yeah.
And it's just, I guess it's just one of those weird sort of conundrums where when do you say what sort of things do we think should affect us, and what sort of things do we think, well, that's just not right and not fair?
Yeah.
I don't know where you stand on that. Like, what values do we hold and what values do we push to the peripherals?
It's a very it's a very individual thing. It's something that you have to sit down and really think through. And I think, given all the surgeries I've been through, all the time that, I've sort of spent at home to do this sort of introspective work, I've had to decide where I draw the line, what affects me, what doesn't affect me, which areas of my culture I prescribe to, which areas of my culture I don't, and how I still continue to respect my elders. And because Asian culture is very much about family. That's the thing. Whereas, other cultures might be more about the individual. And I think both might be right. Both have their place. But when it comes to a chronic illness and you have to sort of balance family with the individual need, it's very hard. And I think I've had to it's been a very challenging time trying to navigate some family occasions, family like affairs or family prayers that I have to do. And I can't sit there and fast for 5 hours. And yet that's expected of me because that's what my family wants, or that's what his family wants. And trying to navigate that without upsetting people and still respecting them while still doing right by my own body, it's like this fine balance. And honestly, it rips you apart at times. And you have to sort of sit there and think about, Tina, what are you willing to sort of give up? And what are you willing to say, no, this is where I draw the line? And I think that's been the real challenge for me in all of this. Is there's been so many family situations, and I have to decide where it is that I need to stand up for myself and say no, and where it is where I'll say, okay, you know what, I can let that one slide.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's an inner battle for everybody to sort of find their own footing in those things. So like with that sort of discussion, like how was it for you whenever your medical team started discussing that you were going to have an ostomy, and like how did that impact sort of family, and like how did you feel about that when it was first proposed?
That's a great question. So I was diagnosed, like I said, in 2006. In 2008, I got very sick. Honestly, nothing was working. And in May of 2008, I remember my GI wanted me to see a surgeon. My family was extremely reluctant. My father had an ostomy. And mind you, my father passed away nearly 30 years ago now, 28, 29 years ago. And ostomies were very different back then. The technology certainly had not been perfected the way that it is now. And my father hated it out of sheer, I hate this thing, it's disgusting type of thing. My mom saw that, and my mom had to really deal with the ostomy. And I think she had significant post-traumatic stress from that experience. And that left me with, oh no, Tina, you're not getting the ostomy. That's hell on earth. You're only 24 years old. No one's going to marry you. No one's even going to think you're attractive. It smells, it's this, it's that. Like, I got an endless laundry list as to why I cannot get an ostomy. Mind you, the ostomy was just an intermittent plan because, remember, I had been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. So the plan was for me to get a J pouch. Even though when I finally had ostomy surgery, I actually wanted to keep my ostomy because I liked it and because I felt so much better with it. Yet the pressure was on me from my family, from society saying, ew, that thing is disgusting. I don't care if it saved your life. You need to get that thing reversed and have a J pouch done. I would never have opted for a J pouch. Let me be clear about that. I was very content with my ostomy. In fact, when my ostomy was finally reversed in 2009, I went through this huge grieving process that whole year because honestly, my stoma became like my baby. It was something that I cared for in that time. It helped me heal. It gave me life again. And I went through separation anxiety when it was gone. And I didn't feel as great with my J pouch. So there were a lot of mixed emotions going into my ostomy surgery. There was a lot of pushback from my family to the point where my family did not even want to take me for surgery. It became an emergency. My now husband and a good friend of mine had to come to my mom's house in New Jersey, pick me up, take me to the emergency room in Manhattan, where my surgeon was. And my surgeon did the surgery against my family's will, but I was over 18, thank God. And I said, please, I need to have surgery. And he was like, you needed to have surgery 2 months ago, Tina. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to save you. And that's exactly how he said it. He's like, you're really sick. I think I was 85 pounds then. I'm not sure how much that is in kilograms. I had a PICC line in my arm over here. And it was basically bypassing my gut to feed me because I was not able to keep anything down. Being 24 years old, the hair on my head was graying. I was completely malnourished. I really did feel like I was dying and couldn't keep myself together. So he had warned me going into that surgery, I'm not sure you're going to make it, but I'm going to try my best. And I was scared. But till this day, I can't tell you, Johnny, I wish that I had had that surgery sooner. It's not as bad as what people make it out to be, and it really does save lives.
So was this after your J pouch, or was this?
This was before. So this was my temporary ileostomy, and I had it done the 4th of July in 2008. And I had the J pouch done in November 2008. So I was sort of forced into having the J pouch done after that and having the ostomy reversed.
And was that social pressure, or did you?
Yeah, it was social pressure. It was completely social pressure. I really did not want the J pouch. And it was not just social pressure, pressure from my surgeon too. I was told that it was a cure for UC, and that being that I was so young, if I had problems with the J pouch, it could easily be, undone. That's not true. A J pouch excision is no joke. I've had it done. It's not a joke. So I will, advise caution to patients all the time, and I do all the time nowadays. If you're doing well with an ostomy and you don't mind it and you kind of like it, there's no reason for you to undergo more surgery. That's my personal opinion. Societal pressure be damned. Surgeons can give you their advice, and as they should, but ultimately this decision's up to you. I know people who've done beautifully well with J pouches, And I know people like myself who've done horribly not well with a J pouch. So it's really a toss up, and I think it really just depends on a person's disease. But for me, I wish I had kept the ostomy. It would have saved me a lot of surgeries and a lot of disability.
Yeah, I think you're not the first person I've heard say that. I've gone J pouch because of my career requires me to not have an ostomy if I wanted to keep it. If that's pressure, I don't know what is. But you know, I think also as well from a perspective, I don't know many people that have had a healthy functioning J pouch that have then opted to go for an ostomy. You know, because it's kind of again, it's one of those situations where if you've got a healthy functioning J pouch, then you probably wouldn't consider it. But for people that are struggling with it, I think it's a really viable option to just try and come to that decision sort of for yourself, but maybe a little bit quicker rather than struggling. But then my consultant, whenever I was talking to him about having my takedown and returning to J pouch, one of the main concerns I had was the frequency of going to the toilet. Because again, like with an ostomy, the pressure isn't there for going to the bathroom, which was such a relief considering where I was before the surgery had occurred. And I was like really apprehensive about having that sense of urgency to come back and being caught short of a toilet, whereas with an ostomy you're never really worried about it unless you've like left it for hours and hours and hours and the bag's going to pop. But yeah, I was like really concerned about that. And he's like, look, some people go 4 times a day and absolutely hate having a J pouch because they've got to go to the toilet and they just don't enjoy the toilet experience. But I've got other patients that are going 11 times a day and really enjoy having a J pouch because they don't have to have a bag to change. And it's just the spectrum within that sphere is so huge. He couldn't really give me any direct advice.
I think that's the best way to put it. I think my surgeon was more like, you're young. You know, I think it's worth a shot. And if your family is so against the ostomy, it's definitely worth the shot, and it can be reversed. Worst case scenario, you go back to the ostomy. It wasn't quite that simple. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people who don't like the ostomy at all. And I think the J pouch has its place and it has its value. And depending on lifestyle, depending on so many different factors for your own personal self, I think this is a personal decision that should be made. For me, hands down, it would have been, I should just keep the bag. And I wish that it could have just been my decision, is what I'm saying. So I think, you know, I always encourage patients to speak to different people, talk to their surgeon extensively about this and understand the risks and the benefits, and also consider what it is that you prefer, you know? So I think that's what it boils down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like I remember actually, it's only probably over the course of this coronavirus lockdown where I've kind of actually come to terms with having a J pouch. Yeah. I did it because I wanted to continue my career in the military, but as well as that, there was a vanity aspect. But I don't think there was lots of hang-ups I had about having my J pouch, and lots of things that I'm don't quite enjoy, like irritation that you can get from it. The getting up in the nighttime and things like that. There's lots of little things. And one of my friends who I've had on the show, he only got diagnosed August last year and then was having surgery not long after that. And he was really keen to have a J pouch, and he was asking me my advice about what a J pouch was. And I started giving him advice, and then I had to stop myself because I was like, right, I don't know if I'm actually advising you in a fair, unbiased way, because the stuff I'm saying to you is my problem or problems with the J pouch. I don't know whether that's actually a problem with the J pouch or if that's my own take on things because I haven't done the mental work or the physical work to improve that, or whether I've just decided this is crap and I'm just going to complain about it. So it's one of those weird sort of situations where I was like, I started down this pathway of giving like all this advice and said, don't do it, just stick with your ostomy, you're better off. And then I was like, I don't know if that's actually fair.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Like I often tread down that path where I'm like, don't do it, and then I'm like, I catch myself and I'm like, you know what, this might be better for them. That they have to decide what's good for them, you know, based on their own personal situation and lifestyle. So, and yeah,
No, totally, because that's something I'm still considering is, do I want to go back to having an ostomy? Will that give me a little bit more stability of how I want to be? But yeah, again, I don't know. I think the main thing for me, and I don't know if you would agree, I'm sure you probably would agree, knowing the work that you do, is that whichever you decide, if surgery becomes an option, you can have a really full and enjoyable life if you choose to afterwards.
Exactly. I think that I've seen plenty of people do really well with the J pouch. There's been times when I've done okay with it. And I certainly know people who've had ups and downs with their ostomy, including myself, and people who've done fantastically with it. And I think there are ways to sort of work with these things. Look, no one's life is perfect, healthy or not. And that there's always adjustments we have to make in life, but there are ways to make sure that we live the fullest life possible. And I truly believe that, even after seeing all this.
Yeah, and I think one of the amazing things I've noticed over the last sort of 12 months that I've kind of stepped into the space is the number of people that are having a really high functioning life.
Yeah.
Be that in elite sports or within business.
Medical
They're
field.
performing so well, either with significant medication to manage their IBD, to having ostomies or J pouches, or lots of other different surgical things that can actually happen, which I wasn't overly confident on. But yeah, it just amazes me like how many people are actually, you know, performing in the top 1% of their field.
Absolutely.
And, you know, struggling along with Crohn's or IBD. So it just shows that, you know, it is possible. It's not the end of days.
Exactly. And look, we have seen presidents and prime ministers around the world living with this condition. Yes, we had a recent case of the Japanese prime minister, I think, stepping down. But I think when you do, sometimes we have to step away and tend to our health and get things optimized. And then we step back into those high functioning careers. Sometimes it takes years. It took me years. Sometimes it takes months. But it is possible. And I think, you know, technology, medication, surgery has advanced so much, especially since the time of my father, you know, where honestly they had nothing. They had prednisone, they had sulfasalazine, azulfidine type drugs. And that's all they had. They didn't have any biologics when he was alive. And, you know, I often think back and wonder, you know, had they had biologics 10, 15 years sooner, would he have survived? These conditions don't take lives the way that they used to. So I think that's something reassuring, is not only do they not take lives the way that they used to, but there's ways to improve quality of life during this time too, because of the advent of so many different technologies, both medically and surgically.
Yeah, and I think it's the way we're moving, it's almost like it's exponential, the difference from year to year and what's available and how we're sort of managing the treatments. And it's sort of, yeah, it's almost incomparable to, like, one of my friends' relatives had a J pouch and ostomy surgery in the early 90s. And like their experience is so far removed from what my experience is today. And it's just like, wow, it's almost like we've had two different things done to us. You mentioned that you met your now husband after you were diagnosed. Is that right?
Yeah, within a few months of me being diagnosed. So
how did you find that process then of dating? And you didn't have an ostomy at the time when you first met him, but like, how did you find the process of initially dating with all the complications that IBD adds, and then introducing the chat about, by the way, I'm going to be having a poo in a bag in a few weeks?
It was hard to navigate, I'm not going to lie, but at the same time, I will have to preface this conversation with one thing. In my culture, a lot of people don't share that they have a condition before getting married because it prevents their marriage. And that was something I did not want to do. I don't believe in that. I believe in being an open book. I believe in making sure the person knows what they're getting themselves into. This is a lifetime of potentially caregiving. And I felt like it was my responsibility to tell him. So I told him openly. I'd say within the first 4 or 5 weeks of us dating, maybe 6 weeks of us dating, when things were starting to get serious, I was like, and you know, I had to be hospitalized and stuff. I think I told him right before my hospitalization that, you know, I have this condition. I don't want you to feel like I've ever hidden it from you. He is of my culture. He's of my background. So he is his family's from India as well. And so I did not want him to feel like he's being blindsided here. So I wanted to be open and honest. I don't believe that relationships can be built on lies or dishonesty, or hiding, you know, facts. So I told him, and he didn't seem to be too concerned about it. I was like, is this not bothering you? Like, do you want to learn more about it? He's like, I do want to learn more about it. But honestly, my initial feeling is, okay, if it does get serious, it does get serious. But isn't that what relationships are about? He had a very mature sort of line of thinking about this. And I think not just that, he was like, it's hard to meet people that you connect with on so many levels that when you finally meet someone that you really connect with, like, you hold on to that, sickness or not. And I think seeing that and hearing that really gave me a lot of hope. And even thinking back to it today, you know, his acceptance, his lack of judgment, in this case, like, we need more of that in this world. And I was just so impressed, you know, with the way that he approached this. And, you know, I was just like, he's a keeper. And that was something that drew me closer to him, I think, is knowing that he was okay with this. You know, there was still a doubt in my mind, should things get serious, will he leave? Will he get a lot of pressure? And he did get a lot of pressure to leave me a couple of years in, when I got very sick and needed surgery. But he withstood that pressure, and he didn't take it on. He didn't take any of it. And he still, you know, decided to marry me and pursue this relationship. And so you know, seeing that and watching him, I think, has given me, you know, there's a lot of times we lose hope in love, in sort of relationships, when we go through a major chronic illness like this, because a lot of times we are duped. There's other guys that I dated that I never told before him, because I didn't feel like they were mature enough to sort of handle that, nor did I feel like I was really that into them. So the way that he sort of handled this, you know, gives me a lot of hope. It gives me a lot of, you know, understanding that people can accept this. That, you know, and people tell me all the time, oh, Tina, you're so lucky to have met him, this, that, or the other. I don't think this is about luck. I think that I would not have told him. I think that I would not have even pursued this if there was even an ounce of doubt in my mind that he would have a problem with this. So I think this is very much one of those things that you kind of have to have a sense for. And you have to if you're putting yourself out there, you have to do it in a way where you know that that person's got your back. Otherwise, like, why even waste your time? So that was sort of my thinking, is I got to know him a little bit, but I waited just long enough to be like, okay, this is an acceptable time to tell him. But I didn't wait too long and be like, you know what? It's been too long now. It's like lying. So I wanted to get to a point where I didn't tell him on the first date necessarily, because it's not relevant on a first date potentially. But I also didn't want it to be like 6 months down and I'm telling him and he's like, Tina, what the heck? You know, now we're in a serious relationship and you're telling me this now?
Yeah, 6 months is a bit of a...
Or even 3 or 4 months. Like, if you've already gotten serious, I feel like This is not something that you just hide and keep from somebody. But that said, you know, I did struggle dating wise. I was using a lot of enemas. I was using a lot of suppositories. And I think in the beginning, I struggled with telling him that. And, you know, I would use it in the bathroom if I would stay over, things like that. But it got to a point where I was like, Tina, you have to, if you're going to be in a relationship with this person, you have to tell him and show him, like, this is not something that, you know, you've told him you have ulcerative colitis. He doesn't understand what that means until you show him, like, this is the kind of medication I'm on, or, oh, I can't really eat that because it's too spicy and it hurts my stomach. That's the other factor in our culture, right? Food's spicy, and I can't eat the way that a lot of people in our culture can. And it often comes across as rude when I don't eat other people's food, or and they're like, you know, all she cares about is herself. So
that's something I never even thought of until you mentioned it about your culture, like, and how that can, because it's a food that generally speaking we avoid, and I didn't realize that, like, because your culture, excuse me for maybe misreading the culture, but I feel your culture is very orientated around food and social gatherings based around that.
Absolutely. All social gatherings are based around food. And he's from South India, and their food is an order of magnitude spicier than anything I've ever eaten in my life. So, you know, in the beginning, I was just eating his parents' food. And then it got to the point where I'm like getting sick, throwing up, having diarrhea. And I'm like, I can't eat that. I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to be rude to your parents. And this went on for a while because his parents would take it personally initially. And it was very, very hard for me to stand up for myself and be like, I can't eat like that without killing myself. So it's been a real struggle on that end. You know, he had to see my dietary restrictions. He had to sort of see, oh, she's using enemas and suppositories. Oh, you know, she needs them in the morning. She needs them in the evening. He saw sort of the cadence of my life being different from other 22, 23-year-olds, because that was my age at the time. And I think it definitely processed, it definitely got in there that, okay, she's sick. But I don't think it really hit until I got very, very sick in early 2008 and needed surgery. And I think that's normally the case when you're in a relationship until you get really sick and they see you start losing weight, or see you need to do oral nutrition or have a surgery, or, you know, start taking infusions or have tens of appointments. I think it really starts to sink in then. And I think that's what had happened with him as well. But he still didn't back down. He was like, you know, this is the woman I love, you know, just in the same way as, you know, you get married, you take those vows. If I've been with her for a couple years and everything else in our relationship is fine, why would I leave her for this? And I admire that quality in him. I think that's a great way of looking at this. I know that a lot of people in the world don't feel that way, that they consider this, you know, for lack of a better word, perhaps a burden. But like, anybody can get sick at any time, you know, and we don't know. Anybody can develop a chronic illness even after marriage. What are you supposed to do? Just walk out of that? I think this is a commitment. When you get into a relationship, I feel the same way. When you get into a relationship, a marriage, and you're committed, it's not one of those things that you just walk away from because your partner's facing a lot of adversity at this time, health-wise. And so I really look up to him in that respect, that he stood by my side through all of this.
Yeah, and I think we've both been quite lucky in the sort of relationship department. I would say my experience with my wife has been fairly similar to yours. What advice would you want to give to people maybe who haven't found that partner, or have gone now through, you know, a couple or multiple unsuccessful relationships and their IBD or their illness has been cited as the cause for the breakup, like it's too much stress or you never go out or that kind of stuff. Like what sort of advice would you give, like relationship advice would you give to those people?
I think that's a fantastic question, Johnny. What kind of advice would I give to people who are struggling in the dating world? I would first say don't give up. I know, living in New York City, I have so many single girlfriends in their mid to late 30s, single guy friends in their mid to late 30s who are healthy, who are able-bodied, who are not able to find a partner. I don't think that this has to necessarily be about health or fitness. I think that this is really about you presenting the best version of yourself, who you are as a human being, kindness, everything. Dating is very hard in today's world. I know that. I've heard it so many times from so many of my friends. I think it's really important, to meet a variety of different people. When you find somebody who seems to really click with you, I think you'll know. And I think you'll know when the right time is to tell that person, whether it's the third, fourth, fifth, sixth date. I think that's the time that you bring this sort of thing up. And I think that's really going to be the truth serum for the relationship is, okay, I like you. I'm going to share this aspect of my life with you. If you're not okay with it, it's not too far down the road where you can, sort of step away and start dating again. I just want to encourage people not to give up. It's really, really easy to lose hope, to lose faith that, everybody in this world is the same. There are not. There's plenty of people like you and me who have successful relationships in spite of their illnesses. In fact, I know more people who do than don't. And I think it's very, very important to sort of put yourself out there, try to keep meeting people. The right person will love you for who you are in spite of your illness. And I think that's what the important thing is. And I think a lot of times we tend to internalize ableism towards ourselves. So we'll say things to ourselves like, oh, we don't deserve a partner, or we're too sick for marriage or for a relationship. It's not like that. Everybody deserves love. Everybody deserves happiness, compassion. And I think the way that you put yourself out into the world, a positive, good sort of energy is going to attract the right kind of people. And that's what I truly believe. That's what I've done. And, I hope that, other people can sort of find solace in that as well.
Yeah, and I think like having that approach is just, it's such a balanced approach is really positive. I think sometimes it can be really hard to hear. It's kind of like, when you're your best friends, it's like, just get back on the
9:03 p.m.
Interesting.
Good evening.
I think my Alexa just decided to
I thought maybe it was your baby.
turn that off. No, well, actually, thankfully, it's not the baby. He's comfortably asleep.
Sorry about the police sirens and ambulances. It's New York City, so it's loud over here.
No, that's fine. But yeah, I was just thinking, like, sometimes we can sound. It's hard to hear good advice when you're hurting, and if you do fall out of relationships, the last thing you want to hear sometimes is get back on the bike. It's not you, it's them. The old cliches. But I think, in my opinion, one of the most important things is just to give yourself time.
I agree.
And it's better to be in a relationship that matters than a relationship that doesn't work, if that makes sense.
And I also believe in doing you. I think there is a time and a place to sort of figure out yourself, your illness, if you are single at this time, to try to figure out what it is that you want and who it is that you are. This is something that can hit us very young when we're becoming adults or when we're children or, into adulthood, when we're developing our own identities. So I think it's really important to do you and figure out who it is that you are in the midst of this chronic illness, and then to think about, adding somebody to the mix. So, I think and I see this in my healthy friends too. They will be out dating without sort of understanding what it is that they really truly want in a relationship. I think we need to decide what it is that we find acceptable in a relationship, what kind of qualities we're looking for, what kind of qualities we're working towards in the midst of, our illness, and sort of look for that. And I think once we have a good head on our own shoulders and that we're projecting that kind of positivity and putting ourselves out there the way that we want to be looked at, I think that's really when things start to change. I've seen it happen for me. I've seen it happen for my friends. And I completely agree with you. I don't think that putting yourself out there too many times, or putting yourself out there, when you're not ready, or when you're, recovering from a surgery and perhaps not in the headspace to be in a relationship, may not be the right approach. But when you're there, you'll know when you're there, and you'll be able to put yourself out there.
I find it really interesting what you were just saying there about the approach to dating, and like going out with an idea of what you want and being like, I am looking for specifics. And it just reminded me of a Ben Shapiro, Joe Rogan podcast that I listened to quite recently. Obviously, and Ben Shapiro was talking about the problem with relationships today is guys and girls are going out just for the fun of going out, but like once you sit down and say, look, I'm going to get married and I'm looking for marriage material, he felt that he was able to meet his wife, whereas Joe Rogan was of the opposite opinion, going like, how do you know what you want in a wife when you haven't experienced a woman? And it's sort of like, oh, okay.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, Johnny, because I think it's akin to the process of accepting your illness too. Like we were talking about denial and all these other emotions earlier, and taking the time out to really sort of understand and digest, so to speak, this illness and the changes that you have to make in your life. I think there's a lot of growing up that happens in that process. And so when we have a chronic illness, oftentimes a lot of us have had to grow up beyond our years. And that's why I say, if you've done sort of the work around accepting your illness, a lot of times going out with that kind of mentality, sort of doing the work, understanding who it is that you are, and understanding what it is that you might be looking for in a partner, whether that's marriage or a committed relationship or what have you. I think that's what's essential. I think where a lot of us get burned is seeking these fun times, which all of us want to do at a young age. I think it's important to recognize that. But when we are actually sitting down to look for a relationship with our condition, we have to sort of take a step back and ask ourselves what it is that we actually want. So I agree with you. I think that this takes a lot of maturity and a lot of introspection.
Yeah. And I guess in that podcast, what Ben Shapiro is getting at is getting the woman, selecting your partner based on what you think would matter as opposed to what fits right now. And I think that's a lot of the times what people end up in is a relationship that works in the moment, but actually when you look at who you are as individuals, it's not very compatible further down the line, I think is what he was getting at.
Exactly. And so that's what kind of happened to me. I think when I met my now husband, then boyfriend, we were having dinner and I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh my God, this guy shares like the same values as me. I've never met someone like that. And I was like, oh my God, I could actually see us getting married down the line. But I was like freaking out because I was 22 and I was like not quite ready for a relationship. But it's funny, like at the same time, I'm recognizing it. I'm sitting at the dinner table and I'm like, Tina, take a step back for a second. He's talking about all the things that you want in a potential partner for the rest of your life. And he's sitting right in front of you. Don't let this go. It was sort of that recognition. And I think, bringing that awareness when you're in a situation like that, I could have easily run from that situation. Sometimes when we're young, we want to because we just want to have fun. But I was like, no, I need to get to know him. there's something about him. We share a lot in common, but we're very different people at the same time. So I think it's really important to sit down and recognize if that partner or the person you're dating is not just in the now, do they have similar values to you, for the future? And I think that's what a committed relationship or a marriage comes from.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. One of the things you mentioned was obviously getting to know and understand and showing your partner, or introducing them to what your healthcare routine is and things like that, and showing this is where I'm different. And with your culture, having a chronic disease, you mentioned, is quite a taboo, and it can really impact on like the lifespan of that relationship, which is no doubt a scary and almost turns it into an anxiety issue probably. How did you feel about introducing intimacy to your relationship, especially after having an ostomy? Like, how did that go for you? What was your concerns at the time? Were they alleviated immediately, or was this something you had to work on?
I think my ostomy was definitely a concern, but initially what had happened is he was my boyfriend at the time, and I had just woken up from surgery and I was just so thrilled to be alive. And I remember him walking into the room, and he kind of saw them changing my ostomy, the nurse and the nurse's aide. So I think it was like not even that I had to sort of introduce him to my ostomy. He was kind of like, wow, that thing looks like Snuffleupagus.
That happened.
Sesame Street. I'm like, okay. And I was like high on painkillers or whatever. So it was like, that process kind of got taken care of for me. But I think for me, the thing about intimacy was really about finding wraps or something to cover it up that felt comfortable, that looked cute. So my hospital system introduced me to Ostomy Secrets. I think the person who started the company actually had surgery at my hospital. So they introduced me to that, and I bought a few of those, and I think that helped tremendously with my confidence. Where I had the biggest issues with intimacy, I must be really honest with you, more so than the ostomy, was actually when I developed my first rectovaginal fistula. You can't see it. I mean, at least doctors can see it. I could feel it. And for me, that was, it felt like it had violated sort of my female parts more than anything else. This ostomy was a diversion sort of from that perianal region into my abdomen, right? So it was a little bit different for me. Plus I could, get around it with nice, cute covers. For me, it wasn't as big of an issue to wrap my head around. But with the fistulas I had, the infections that I had, sort of the stool and mucus and blood passing through, it just felt like I was constantly being violated by this thing. And I think intimacy became really tough for me. I was afraid oftentimes of having sex. And
what made you feel afraid? What was it that was scary?
I was afraid of him getting infected or me getting infected further. I was sort of afraid because I felt like I had a constant UTI. Most of the time it was because there was fecal bacteria getting into the region.
And was this fecal bacteria getting into your vagina, or was this?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So that is very significant.
It was very significant. A rectovaginal fistula, that I had 5 of them. That was from at the age of 28. And from 2011 to 2015, that was my biggest struggle. And I think to date, having those rectovaginal fistulae was the biggest struggle I had with Crohn's. I don't think people talk about this enough with Crohn's disease. And this is one of the topics that I talk about a lot. You may have seen Dr. Nundy and I did a Facebook Live on it a couple months ago, and I try to talk about this as much as possible because there's a lot of people suffering with it, and it's extremely, extremely stigmatized, and you can understand why now. Men can have it in their private parts. Women certainly have it. It's more common than we think. I believe the latest estimates are like 30 to 50% of patients have fistulas of some kind. Perianal disease, it's hitting your private parts. So it really feels like you've been violated by this disease, which we feel anyway. But it's like an order of magnitude worse when it's in your private parts, your sexual parts. And I think that was a really hard pill for me to swallow, knowing that I had these and at such a young age. And what did I sort of do to deserve this? And I felt like I couldn't be a good wife to my then, at that point, he had already become my husband. And I was just like, what the hell? Now I can't even properly have sex. There is no way you can put a wrap over that or a seal over that or anything like that. A lot of my surgeries were unsuccessful with regards to that. And a lot of them, they put cetons in, which just lays them flat open to drain more so that the infection can leave. So it was a very, I don't even know if humbling is the right word. It was a humbling experience, but it was an excruciating and debilitating experience for me personally, emotionally, and with regards to intimacy, like I just did not feel comfortable whatsoever. It was very hard.
And how did you get through this? Like, how was it rectified, and like, how did you as a person survive?
Yeah. So we restarted. So let me backtrack. I had to have multiple surgeries to lay these open, put cetons in. But then on top of that, at this point I had a J pouch, and my fistulas were going from the anastomosis site, which is the site connecting the J pouch to the rectum, the rectal cuff, the teeny bit that's left, into the vaginal wall. And so what was going on was initially they were like, is this a surgical sort of issue? I got a second opinion. They were like, no, this looks like Crohn's. You have some backflow into your ileum from the J pouch in terms of granulomas and ileitis. So this looks like Crohn's, plus the fistulizing disease. So at that point, I was recommended, let's divert you, meaning let's disconnect the J pouch, leave it in there. In a lot of cases, it calms down and you'll get a temporary ileostomy. And I was like, oh, hallelujah. You know what I mean? After 6 years, I'm getting like my ostomy back and stuff. Anyway, so I was like, okay, just divert me. Fine. But then the disease kept recurring in the J pouch. I kept developing more and more fistulas in spite of it being disconnected. And they're like, what the heck? You're disconnected. Like, there's no stool passing through. There's nothing in that region that should be causing inflammation other than the fact that your body just wants to create that or just wants to fight it. So I kept getting fistula after fistula after fistula in that region. And finally, they were like, okay, we want to retry biologics on you. And you know how biologics are. They take time, like, to start working and to see if, especially in the case of fistula, it's breaking through your skin. So it's breaking through the mucosal lining into another organ. Can you imagine how much time it takes to repair that kind of inflammation? In some cases, it never gets repaired. That's why there's surgical options. So here I was retrying biologics after diversion surgery. And Remicade I had, which is infliximab, I had anaphylactic shock to because it was reinduced. And some patients, upon reinduction, don't tolerate it because they have antibodies, which I clearly had. Humira didn't work. Then we tried Entyvio, which was brand new at the time. It was 2014. And that didn't work. I developed 2 new fistulas while I was on that. And then they were like, okay, Tina, I think we need to take you in ASAP and have this J pouch removed. I was like, all right, just get rid of this thing. Just give me a permanent ileostomy. I'm done. Like, I'm so finished with this thing. So finally, this was the end of 2014. They pulled out my J pouch, except it wasn't done correctly in New York. And I think this is the part that really broke the camel's back. Because
it's a lot to bear.
It wasn't done correctly. There were bits and pieces of J pouch and rectum left inside. And I thought I was done. You know, my J pouch is gone. These fistulas, they've sealed. They've tried to repair them. I thought I was done. No, Johnny, I was not. This was now January of 2015. I'm practically like living in the hospital, having surgery after surgery, trying to correct this thing. And I go to other hospitals in Cleveland and to Mayo Clinic to get other opinions. And they basically told me, look, Tina, this has not been done correctly. I'm sorry. And Cleveland gave me an option to re-excise the area, take a flap from the back of my leg called the gracilis muscle flap, and fill the wound, because I was left with a chronic rectal wound that was constantly bleeding after my J pouch excision surgery.
That is crazy. That's like, I don't understand how they could ethically have done that, or like what the surgical team were doing.
I don't know. That's why I said in the beginning of this conversation, whoever told me, like the surgeon, when he told me a J pouch excision is not a big deal, you know, it's a big deal. It's a hard surgery, and it's a hard surgery to recover from, to have a proctectomy, your rectum fully taken out. So anyway, the Mayo Clinic ended up doing my corrections, and they ended up re-excising the pouch and rectum, and they ended up leaving a wound this big on the side of my bottom. Yeah, I'm not that big. So if you can like imagine, it was massive. I was suicidal at the time. I couldn't sit, I couldn't lay down. I was having to inject hydrogen peroxide into the wound myself, which, if you know anything about hydrogen peroxide, if you put it on a cut, it burns like all hell. So imagine putting that into your pelvic region with a drain. So that was a really tough summer for me, 2015. And at the end of all of that, they told me that this thing is going to close. We have a vacuum attached to it that's sucking the pressure out. It will close. But at the end of all that, they found another fistula. And they were like, and I was complaining. I was like, I feel like I have another fistula. I have these UTI symptoms. So they took me in for an MRI. And they're like, you have a hole in the vaginal wall, but there's no rectum. I'm like, what? And the GI doctor there was like, I've seen this a couple times before where the disease is trying to continue even without the organs there. And he's like, I'm going to put you in a clinical trial. I don't know how he got me in.
That is crazy.
I really have no idea how he got me in. But he got me into the Stellara clinical trial in 2015. And that closed my last fistula. Thank God. It took a while, like 6 months, and it was a hellish recovery. But come 2016, I was like, oh my God, this is what remission looks like. I've never seen this before.
That is a journey.
It was awful. And I've been on Stellara since, with doses tweaked, flare-ups in between. And I've had multiple diagnoses since then. But that's how I dealt with those fistulas. Long story.
Well, I just can't believe that. That's Crohn's disease, I guess. But I just can't believe that even after protectomy and nothing there, a fish. It's like the body is a weird an occasionally wonderful place.
That is really weird. I'm like, leave it to me to have some like phantom fistula show up out of nowhere. It was honestly, like, I don't know how I survived that. And what you said earlier about realizing and recognizing how strong you are through some of these battles, it's definitely there. I mean, this is something that can totally break your back. But if you come out of it, you come out of it stronger. And I think this is what drives my advocacy work, Johnny, to be completely honest with you, is I don't want people going through what I went through. And
yeah, no, definitely. And it's, you know, just listening to that story, it has taken so much strength to get through that. And I think sometimes, though, you need to walk that path just to find out who you are.
yeah.
Well, like, how did that affect things like you? Like some of the things I talked about with Nilanjan was fertility and fecundancy. Was that a discussion with you? Because you're a young woman.
Yeah.
Family planning is possibly on the horizon for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's a big concern, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you know, and that goes back again to that whole concept of marriage and fitness, because it's fitness to reproduce too. So that was one of the conversations that came up early on between Anand and me is, do we want kids? And, you know, he kept telling me, I'm not super interested and I'm not sure I want to put you through that. And I think that has only become more vehement in the last few years, where he's like, I'm not really interested right now, but perhaps the conversation will be, we can perhaps adopt down the line. And that's something we've talked about many times. My doctors have recommended against pregnancy for me. I think for many women with IBD, some of the AGA recommendations are stay on your biologic, work with maternal fetal medicine, work with your OBGYN and colorectal surgery and GI teams together, sort of multidisciplinary care, and, you know, decide on a course of action. I've had friends get pregnant with J pouches, with ostomies, etc. But given all the scar tissue that I have, the extent of the surgeries I've had, my doctors here in New York and at Mayo Clinic feel pretty strongly about me not getting pregnant. And, you know, we've sat down, we've had this conversation many times over the last 5 or 6 years, where it's been like, you know what, Tina, initially when I had the J pouch, even when I initially got the ostomy back, my OBGYN, my doctors were like, you know, this could be a possibility. But ever since what happened with the J pouch excision, the wound vac, and significant scarring and pelvic floor dysfunction, and all these fistulas, I've basically been told. I had a doctor tell me a 1.5 years ago, and he's a fertility specialist. He was like, you know, Tina, could you realistically get pregnant? Yes. Would I advise it? No. And I said, why is that? And he's like, I'm going to have to go in there and possibly have to slash your bowel to get to your baby. And I don't want to have to do that. There's a lot of scarring in there, and it's a really tough subject to talk about. And I think, actually, Johnny, this is the first time I'm talking about this openly, so thank you. It's a really tough subject for me because, you know, after all the fistulas I've had, they sort of take your womanhood from you. And I've never really been particularly keen on having children. I always thought, yeah, maybe down the line. And now we are down the line, and I'm like, okay, you know, like that sort of situation. And I think it was more of an avoidance thing. But when you hear from your doctor, I'm not recommending this, it's almost taking away your ability to do what should be a God-given right. being a woman. So I think that was really hard for me to hear. It sort of put a stamp or a seal on it, a finality to it that perhaps I was avoiding.
Definitely, like it is so hard whenever a biological truth is essentially removed from you, and and the biological truth of woman is the ability to reproduce or carry a fetus to term, and that's such a again struggling for words to describe that situation. Like I'm fortunate not to have had that situation within my life, but it's one of those that I don't think you can actually put your finger on it unless it's actually happened to you. Like I know people that are going through IVF having had difficulty or the inability because of their sexual preference is the wrong word, but because they are in a same-sex relationship, or they're in a relationship where they're having difficulties for whatever reason to produce naturally, and the partner is having miscarriages or the baby isn't taking and things like that, and dealing with those situations is difficult as it is, but to be told there's no chance before you've even entertained the discussion almost it's got to be like, how was that journey for you?
It was hard. I think it would have been harder if I was hell-bent on having children, which I was not. But I also think at times that I felt guilty taking that away from my husband, that it was my fault. But at the same time, he reassures me that he was not really crazy about the idea and that adoption's still an option, which I know it is. So it's one of those things where it's like this disease itself is so isolating, as it is. Now seeing all my friends around me having kids, even in the IBD population, it feels even more isolating, honestly, given that, I'm an aunt and all those things and have good relationships with my friends and their children. Do I feel left out? Yeah. It's also like, am I afraid that I won't have the experience of motherhood in my life? Yeah. I'm the type of person who likes to experience everything at least once. So these are sort of the things that are on the table for me, experience-wise, is this is something that, I always thought I would eventually do. And being advised by your doctors otherwise feels like, okay, this disease didn't just violate you in so many different ways. Now it's taking away your God-given right too. So it's, in a lot of ways, I've felt disempowered, but also disemboweled by this disease, pun intended. But also I've felt like, I've had to sort of create an identity for myself outside of these things. So I am still a woman, and I am still proud to be a woman, as an advocate, as a wife, as a good friend to so many of my friends, as a good family member. And I think we have to remember those things. Our society sort of envelops the role of a woman as, somebody who gives birth. And you hear able-bodied women talking about this all the time, actresses and stuff, who've chosen not to give birth. And it's almost like, a stamp's put on them that they're childless. But the reality is that choice can be liberating too. And I think it should be somebody's choice. But when that choice gets taken away from you because of an illness, I think that's the hardest part to digest.
Yeah, and like bearing children is an amazing aspect of womanhood, but
Yep.
it's not the only aspect. And like I was saying last week about we were talking about this obviously, and one of the things that I was talking about was how amazing women are, and that every person that is alive today comes from a woman, and that process is amazing, but it's not the only aspect about being a woman. And it's, it's like saying that the only thing a man is an erect penis. Like, there's more to being a man, there's more to being a woman than our reproductive organs. And I think that's something to really allow people to think about and to understand, particularly, I mean, I guess one thing to make a career decision, it's another thing, like you said, to have it removed due to disease. And I just, for you to be able to sit here now and discuss that just shows how mentally strong you are. I mean, I've got my views on IVF, and it's not because I don't believe that it's a process. It's not because I don't believe in the process, but because there's an element where you can't deny there is some form of structure within a human for the want to biologically reproduce their own. There's some form of chemical drive there that exists, and if you're not able to fulfill that, it must be one of the most frustrating things, difficult things to come to terms with. Like, I've got family members that, I don't know if they won't be discussing this, but I've got family members that they haven't been able to do that, and they've had to watch the other family members have successfully reproduced and have families and babies of their own, and actually watch those babies have their own babies. And it's like, how do they feel? And like, as much as those children interact in their lives and bring their babies to their lives and include them as much as possible, there's an element where you're still sat there going, but they're not mine. And it's just like, I can't sit there, I can't comprehend where that puts them, because in my head as well, I'm always like, as you mentioned, adoption. I think adoption is an amazing opportunity for both people, for the parents and the adopted child, because there are, and I don't want to feel like I'm speaking out of turn, but there isn't a population problem in the world, if that makes any sense, but there is a problem with child abuse and unwanted children. And I think the ability to adopt is, again, it's for me, it's like a selfless act. As horrible as not being able to biologically reproduce, there's an opportunity to do something great and amazing other than that, which I think is, for me, it's a heartwarming aspect. But then I haven't had to go through your journey, and it's such a difficult journey.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. I think, when I've talked to family and friends about it, I've had friends literally tell me, Tina, like, you can't not have a child. You and Anand would make amazing parents and bring amazing people into the world. And that's heartwarming to hear. But at the same time, it feels like a huge loss,
It doesn't make it feel any better.
Yeah. And then there's times when, we talk about adoption with family, and they're like, well, you should just have at least one of your own. And, I've sat down, I've spoken to reproductive endocrinologists and whatnot. They can certainly pull some eggs. We have talked about it. It's quite expensive to do, in this country. It's done without health insurance. It's in the, to have somebody else carry your egg, it's on the order of $100,000. To carry your egg and sperm, like the gonad, it's on the order of $100,000. So, and I think it's not easy to do that. IVF, I've had friends go through IVF successfully. sometimes it's taken 3 or 4 years, and it's painstaking for them because, again, it feels like a flaw that they can't get pregnant. For me, that option's sort of just out of the window, period, to even try something like that. But, you know, there is some hope in the sense that I could, you know, potentially go the route of, you know, have some like a surrogate mother, like a surrogate, you know, person who can get pregnant for me. But the issue is, of course, the money involved. But on top of that, this disease is running in my family. And I know doctors say, in general, you know, the percentages of it passing along are low. And this is the other reason that my doctors have sort of warned me. For the typical IBD patient who may have had like 1 surgery or 2 surgeries, or, you know, has a J-pouch or ostomy, or even never had surgery, a lot of times they will encourage them to get pregnant. Given my history of so many surgeries and scar tissue and damage to reproductive organs in the process and scarring there, combined with the fact that I have a significant family history that they don't quite understand how it's this aggressive in my family, coming from my background, you know, that coupled with my aggressive history is, you know, it's a scary idea to wrap your head around and be like, okay, perhaps I can pull a few eggs, but do I want my child to have the kind of suffering that my father and I shared? Yes, we've made a lot of strides. There's been a lot of improvements. I probably would not be alive had this happened to me 5 years earlier, or 10 years earlier, as, you know, we saw with my dad's case. But the point that I'm making here is I'm getting hit with a double whammy, you know. You know, I'm getting hit from different angles. And so it's like one of those decisions that, okay, Tina, like, do you want to bring a child into this world and have them suffer the way that you have? I can't do that. I'd rather adopt.
Yeah, no, totally. I guess we're talking about genetics really there, and sort of there's elements of epigenetics where you can cause genes to express maybe or retard, depending on how or certain aspects you amplify within your life. But yeah, I guess at a certain degree, the genetic side of things, like you're talking about your family history there, and obviously usually they're pretty confident that an IBD, the gene of IBD, whatever, or the gene that causes IBD to express, it's a very low risk usually. But I guess if you're looking at your family history and you've got several members of your family and it seems to be a hereditary link, without, well, more confirming or agreeing with your synopsis, is that, yeah, you probably are right. That is that going to reinforce it? And because of the level of severity, is that child going to be more predisposed? And it's such a, like, I've never really thought of it from that perspective. I've always thought of it from a perspective of, well, it's low risk. The chances of it being expressed in your offspring is so low that it's not really even discussed in most cases. But I guess, yeah, if it is hereditary and it's 2, 3, 4 generations, is that gene somehow being promoted within that gene pool as an expressed gene?
Exactly. And when some of the top doctors in the world tell you that, it really makes you start thinking, because they're like, we don't really see this so intensely in South Asian populations. And then the family history, the genetics, we don't really have quite a handle yet on the genetics. What we do know is it's generally a low risk, yet your family seems to be defying those odds. Probably not, you know, that's the kind of sort of rationale I've gotten around this, is perhaps, you know, this is not something you pursue. And even on my husband's side, to be completely honest, there are some autoimmune conditions and issues. So, you know, that's the other thing that's sort of playing into this, especially for my husband. So he's like, you know, it's very easy for this to develop, given, you know, the autoimmune stuff on my side of the family too. So there's been a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth between us, and we've definitely done our research and homework. And I've even spoken to moms, a few of my friends who are moms with IBD. Every time their child has some kind of stomach virus or anything, they're like, is it Crohn's? You know what I mean? It's one of those fears that some of them have. And
I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. Like both of my kids have been like, have they got? And every time there's a wet nappy or oh, I'm feeling crampy, I'm like, oh God, please don't have what I got.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think for me, given the extent of the risk in my family and the way it runs, I don't think I could live with myself, honestly. Like, you know, to have to see what my mom had to do for me in terms of caregiving, being somebody who's gone through as much as I have and gone through so much sickness, I don't think I could do half as much as she did for me, for my child, in terms of helping them through this. And that would break my heart too. So there's been a lot of sort of thought around this, you know, introspection around this, if you will, with regards to pursuing this. And I think it has to be an individual decision. A lot of women are scared. Honestly, if I had half the number of surgeries I had, if I had just had an ostomy and not gone through the J-pouch route, been excised, this would not even be a conversation today. I would have gone through with it, you know? I think that there's a lot of complicating factors in my case, and that makes my decision a little bit more difficult than perhaps the average woman with IBD. So I always encourage women to do their research, to do their homework, and if this is something they really want, to make it happen. And, you know, I'm really glad that you're talking about this, Johnny. It really needs to be talked about more, because in our community, there's a lot of talk about becoming a mom, and encouragement to become a mom, which is extremely, extremely important. I can't emphasize that enough. But I think there has to be a space for the women who are grieving because they can't. And I think that's what I would like to see more of, and that's what I would like to create more of. A space for women who can tell themselves and tell the people around them that it's okay to not have a child because of this condition. So I would like to see a little bit more of that, because the automatic assumption is you're a woman, you're going to have a child. It's not that way this day and age, and women don't have to be shamed for it, or I'm sorry that you can't have a child. It just is what it is, you know, and it's okay. There's other ways around this if you want, and if you don't want, there's ways not to go around it, to just, you know, be. And I think it's okay, whatever you decide.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's kind of a wider picture, again, of almost the elements of what patient advocacy and particularly the IBD community does in its mainstay, but provide, like, obviously it's a slight caveat, but it is just allowing people that are on a slightly different journey just to realize that actually, you know, it's not the end. It's not, you know, this is again, it's creating normal out of abnormal situations and
Absolutely.
making it a sort of a more of a mainstream discussion, making you feel less of an alien, so to speak.
Exactly. And welcomed into the community, you know. I think that this is a topic that's very much on the minds of the 20-something-year-olds or early 20-something-year-olds or even teens being diagnosed with this, that we need to create a space for those women who may not want to or can't.
One of my thoughts about the thing is allowing us to create a space, I think is great, and I think it's right and proper to have somewhere where you feel comfortable to express yourself and discuss things that are bothering you, where you feel people will understand. One of my thoughts as well is, and it's something I try to do with this podcast, is making it a mainstream discussion, it's like sometimes we can feel that we're doing stuff within a small group, but in actuality, what we want in this situation is for the greater society to potentially accept these people for something that isn't actually a fault of their own. And even if it is a decision that you've made that you don't want to have children, you shouldn't be. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're less of like. Do you know what I mean? It's how do we make the wider society more accepting of a woman's either choosing to or not being able to have children? And I feel that across the board within sort of IBD, it's making people accept the situation that people find themselves in more. But I don't know, like, what's your thoughts? How do we achieve that?
I think more people need to speak up. And, you know, I'll be really honest with you, Johnny. I've had a blog post sitting in my drafts for the better part of a year and a half on exactly this topic. So thank you for getting me to talk about it. There was a huge push, I think, 2 years ago to encourage women. And, you know, I sort of got all spruced up with that. And I definitely do encourage women. But I've also seen sort of some of the backlash from that, you know, where women will reach out to me and ask me my thoughts. And I'll tell them, well, if this is something that you really want, please do pursue it. But if this is something you're really scared about, you know, I suggest seeking, you know, therapy, talking about it more closely with your family and your friends, your husband or wife or partner, whomever, and really deciding what's best for you. You can't talk about this topic enough if it's really on your mind a lot. And on top of that, I think we need more advocates speaking about it and creating that space. And that's been on my horizon for some time now. It's working up the courage to make yourself vulnerable enough to expose, okay, I felt like less of a woman because of the fistulas that I dealt with. I also feel like less of a woman because of this. And here it is. I'm presenting it to you on a silver platter. It's a very hard thing to do. And I think my first year of advocacy, I would really panic a lot before hitting the publish button on a lot of my blog posts, and my husband would have to do it. And I think this is going to be one of those situations where I'm going to have to start talking about it. Others will have to start talking about it. And it's a very, very sensitive subject.
Yeah. And I think it's like, yeah, to stand up and be one of the first people to stand up is always going to be a challenge. And I like, hats off to you for, you know, even attempting to be the first to stand is an amazing feat. And it's just like, yeah, sticking your head up. It's so scary. Particularly but this is the thing that I don't understand for womanhood is, God, I don't even know how to approach this without sounding like an absolute imbecile. But in a world, what I find strange, in a world where a man can then change sex to be a woman and be celebrated as always being a woman and being celebrated for the entirety of what a woman like awesomely celebrated as a woman, irrespective of having spent 30 years as a man. And I'm not condoning that, as in, like, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but in the same vein, there are women that have gone through issues that you have gone through and feel shamed by the same society for not being a complete woman. It's like one of those platitudes where I'm like going, this is really interesting.
Yeah, no, there's definitely double standards around this. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, we've really broken the surface on a lot of topics. I had to do this with perianal fistulizing disease. I had to do this with pelvic floor dysfunction. And I feel like this is something that's going to have to be done with regards to this as well. The shame's got to go. It's a woman's body. It's a woman's choice, yes, but sometimes we're not given that choice. And sometimes we don't have that privilege or that luxury, and that's okay. As long as we're okay with it, as long as we're doing the mental work around it, to get the help that we need to make sure that we feel comfortable with this, which is something I've been doing for years. And that's why I've worked up the courage. When you asked me and told me, you know, this topic, I was like, all right, I'm going to be ready for it. Just mentally, to talk about this. I think it's so, so important, you know, to be able to say, again, like I was talking to you about earlier, this is my boundary. This is where I draw the line. I have to choose myself. I have to choose my life, and I have to choose my quality of life here. Do I want children? Do I want to give a child an amazing life? Sure. But I have to consider, am I going to be able to take care of that child? Am I going to be able to handle, you know, some of the GI symptoms the child could have, like just normal everyday type GI symptoms? Am I going to be able to do that? And I think this takes a lot of reality, a lot of maturity, a lot of introspection to sort of come up and say, look, Tina, this is what you can handle. This is what you can't handle. You're a big girl now. You can make those decisions. So that's kind of where I am right now. And part of owning my Crohn's is, you know, sharing that. And it's owning the fact that my body has its flaws, but I'm okay with them. And you know what? We can still be beautiful. We can still live full lives. We can still have full experiences in our lives in spite of having these extremely debilitating diseases, inflammatory bowel disease. So I think that's really what keeps me going, and that's what really drives me, is making sure that people can recognize that and find that with that space within them to create that space for themselves. Because you have to do it for yourself before you can do it for others. And that's kind of where I am right now. So
yeah, and that makes complete sense. And I think one of the aspects of that is it takes such mental strength to sort of get there. And I just wonder, like, you know, you've had some significant things happening within this journey or within your history. And I'm just wondering, like, you've shown a resolute amount of mental strength and adaptability to get through all of this. I'm just wondering how you feel you were supported and what sort of things helped you in terms of your mental health.
Absolutely. Johnny, I just have to tell you, I have to jump in a little bit because I have another call. But just quickly to make sure that I can go through some of the mental health pieces. I think something that's really, really helped me a lot is attending support groups. My mom actually put me in support groups within the hospital system when I had my first surgery. And I think that even though I couldn't speak up in a lot of those support groups at the time, I was taking in what other people were telling me. They didn't have to have the same exact story or experience or what have you. But hearing that there were other people like me definitely helped me. And the other thing that my mom did for me is she put me in therapy. Those two things have been instrumental for me. Working with a psychotherapist, attending support groups. I've led support groups, a women's support group. I've led sort of a co-ed group at times. And I started a teen support group here in New York City. So I've really tried to first work on myself, create that space for myself to sort of heal, and then help push those healing vibes out into the community as a volunteer for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And now, you know, through my advocacy work is try to support the community through some of the work that I do, whether it's writing, whether it's like blogging or, you know, speaking on a podcast like yours, which is brilliant. You know, being able to do these kinds of things, speaking at conferences, bringing people knowledge, education, is really something that helps my mental health every day. It makes me feel like if I have survived all of this, you know, I have to give back to the world. You know, the community has given me so much, allowed me to survive, given me a space. I want to give back. I want to make sort of the lemonade out of the lemons that I've been given. So that's kind of my sort of perspective on mental health and how I've sort of handled my journey.
That's beautiful. I've reached a part of the show where we're pretty much at the end. And I've rubbed it off Lewis Howes. I call it the 3 truths. And essentially it's the end of the world, or the end of your time in this world. Everything you've ever created, everything you've ever done has disappeared for whatever reason. And you only have the opportunity to leave 3 truths or 3 life lessons that you want the world to learn. And so, Tina, what would your 3 truths be?
That's a really good question. I think my 3 truths would be that there's always hope. Sometimes we have to create that hope, but that there's always hope. The second thing is find support however you can, not just to prop yourself up, but to help others. Both ways helps you in the end and helps other people in the end. And I would say the third thing is put out love, put out positivity. The world needs a lot more of it. We see so much negativity today's day and age and in general. I think we need a lot more love, hope, positivity, and support in this world. So I would say those would be my 3 truths. I'd start with hope, then move to support, and then pushing out love and healing into the world.
I think they're great. You know, there's nothing more important in the world than having some hope, being positive. Everyone could always do with a little bit more positivity. And yeah, that unilateral support from giving and receiving, brilliant. I'd just like to take a moment, Tina, just to appreciate you, like, for coming onto the podcast and having such an honest chat about these issues. It's so important to have a voice like yours out there, and everything that you're doing within Own Your Crohn's, you know, including the major topics that you just talked about there, like empowering womanhood from all walks and all experiences. I think that's such an admirable thing. So thank you so much for, and especially living by your 3 truths, you know, bringing hope, providing support and receiving your support in both ways, and just adding that little bit of positivity. I really can't thank you enough.
Thank you so much, Johnny. It's truly an honor to be able to share my story through you. Thank you for the work that you do. I can't wait to hear the podcast.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm just going to close down from the guys now. Okay, guys, that concludes our show tonight. Thank you so much for joining in, and we will catch you on the next one. See you all soon. Bye for now.